I think that was mine. That was mine, Paul. Okay, I don't know. Can they still hear me if my mic isn't on?
Yeah.
Not saying on.
Get it real easy.
Hello?
Don't break it.
There, it's working. We got it. Okay. Woo, okay. Good evening, everybody, and I hope everyone can hear me. I'm gonna kind of keep an eye on attendees here. And the way we have it set up is I'm using the council mic to record everything, and it's also collecting me somewhere else. So hopefully you guys can hear me. It looks like we have planning commission members on. I'm just gonna go through the list here if that's okay with everybody. We have planning commission members, Alan Rainville, Chris Curl, Gordon Rick, Mr. Apodaca. We have staff here. Hold on, I gotta move it up. And then in chambers, we have council members Estes, Thompson, no, not Estes, I'm sorry. Duncan, Applegate, Thompson, Mayor Pro Tem is here, I'm here, and Mr. Geek is online, and Ms. Estes is online. And Mr. Applegate, the other Mr. Applegate is here for Planning Commission. So we have two Applegates in the room, one from Planning and one from City Council. So again, thank you everybody for joining us tonight for our first Master Plan Community Workshop. And again, this is just simply a workshop. We're not making any decisions on anything tonight. We're here to get informed and listen to all the discussion of what a master plan community looks like. And we have some people here that Todd's going to introduce for me. But again, thank you all for attending and waiting patiently as we try to get things going. There may be people that join as we move forward because of apparently there's some weather just to the north of us that really slowed down traffic. So just be aware of that. We may have some people joining in and out. So with that, I'll let Todd go ahead and take it away.
Paul, am I good? Okay. So good evening, everybody. We appreciate everybody joining us in person as well as online. Tonight is I think our fourth that we have done in educational workshops for Planning Commission. There's been a couple for City Council, but this is something we started a couple of years ago. And what we wanted to do was give private entities the opportunity to come in and kind of do educational things for our Planning Commission, our council, on the trends, on what's happening out there, on what things are going on outside of our city. So we appreciate tonight that we have both members of the administration team at La Plata. They are going to go through what they've done in Briargate and some other projects that they've been involved in. So Doug, I think, are you going to be the main presenter for La Plata? Okay, so Doug Corby, he's one of the principals at La Plata, will be here with us tonight. And then doing the majority of the presentation will be Chris Moore. And Chris is with DTJ Designs. They're based out of Boulder, but they've done work all over the United States and specialized here in Colorado. So we appreciate them coming down. And I'm just going to reiterate a little bit about what the mayor talked about. Tonight is not a planning commission session or a city council session. So we have to make sure that we don't ask specific questions, specific projects. And both DTJ and La Plata understand that. So they won't be giving any specifics on projects. So we're going to make sure that we meet those parameters. Troy's online, who's our city attorney. So he wanted to make sure, and Joni is as well, our assistant city clerk. They wanted to make sure that we made sure we stayed along those parameters so that we keep within the parameters of a workshop itself. So with that being said, if that does come up, we'll stop the conversation, adjust it, and then we'll get back on path of just what a master plan community looks like. I want to reiterate to everyone that Fountain's never had a master plan community. So these type of workshops I think are extremely important because we are used to doing smaller developments that are 50, 100 acres, and you do not get the same type of a master planned end result when you do that. And we see a lot of comments and different things that says, hey, Why doesn't the city plan these out? Why doesn't the city bring these type of amenities in? With 50-acre projects, it's almost impossible to do. So we're excited to take a look at master plan communities and hopefully reap the benefits for the public that we've seen in other areas of Colorado and the nation. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Chris Moore. Chris, again, is with DTJ. And Chris, we appreciate you coming down.
Thank you, Todd. Good evening, Mayor, members of council and planning commission. This is fun for me, getting to talk about master plan communities and all of the things that are involved with it. We've spent our career as a design company focused on these types of communities. And so I'll share with you not only what we've been doing, but also what La Plata's been doing, and also some of the trends around the country that we're seeing and hope to bring to Fountain. So we'll start off, talk a little bit about what a master plan community is. You'll see the initials MPC throughout the presentation. That is the kind of the industry standard for master plan community. So don't be confused with that. We'll talk a little bit about, Doug will talk about the La Plata history with master plan communities, as well as we'll give a little bit of insight to that. We'll talk about current trends and tap into a little bit about what might be some of the benefits to Fountain as you're considering these. There's kind of there's two entities here, both DTJ Design and La Plata. And we're kind of highlighting the core team members here as we're working forward on the community that we'll bring to you in the future. But Doug Quimby and Mike Rubinson, both members of La Plata, as well as Guy. Don is here in person, as well as Cody. And so they would be excited to share with you afterwards, I'm sure, what they've learned as well. And we have a core team at DTJ Design. Myself, partner and director of community planning. Brian Rickman, Kyle Lynch, and Michelle are all online. I asked them to please not give me any negative chat notes while we're presenting. So that's the team. We've got a pretty healthy team that is focused on the project here. So key attributes of a master plan community. There's really three things that drive what a master plan community is and make it different maybe from what you've seen in the past and has been brought to the table in the past. One is a strong vision. It's more than just streets and lots, streets and houses. That's a subdivision. We're talking about a community, and a community has a strong vision for what the lifestyle of the community is like, what the open space components are, what the mix of land uses become. There's a variety of land uses and housing types, not just one type. We're talking about a variety of attached and detached, a variety of residential and commercial, civic, parks and amenity spaces. All of those land uses are typically included and thought about very specifically as part of the master plan community. And then there's shared places. We're really, the idea of community, the idea of creating places where people can gather, creating places where people can hang out, creating places where people, residents can meet their neighbors. All of those are very thoughtfully put in place and considered as we approach master plan communities. And so those are really the big three, and we'll get into those a little bit more specifically a little bit later, but those really highlight the top things that you should be looking for as you're considering any of these that come into Fountain. This is taken from, there's several market study groups and market analyst groups that look at master plan communities, and about every 6 months they go through and they rank master plan communities, top 50. They talk about what some of their attributes are. This came from a report July 9th of this year. So this is very recent. There's a couple things that stood out. Master plan communities have historically outperformed residential communities during economic hardships. That's a fact. That goes back several decades. They've looked at master plan communities across the country, and they've found that when the economy starts to get a little shaky, master plan communities sales actually increase. There's always a flight to quality and safety. And I think we've seen that during the last 4 months. We've seen that people are considering where they live, because now they're not only living there, but they're working there. And so they're considering, well, where could be a different type of environment that I could live in? And master plan communities are usually at the top of the list. And then what happens historically is the demand typically outweighs the supply. People desire to live in master plan communities, and there's not enough being built and constructed and developed that allow people who want to live there to move there. And so we're always looking for opportunities to increase that supply level. As of July 2020, sales within master plan communities were up 16% year over year. That is through the pandemic. Sales increased 16% nationally. That's pretty remarkable when you think about it and what happened. There was a very early recovery of sales prior to recovery of sales in many other types of neighborhoods that may have just been builder dominant. There was a very early recovery in April. And then many locations that don't typically have master plan communities. One example is Daybreak in Salt Lake City. There was a 41% increase in sales year over year. That is amazing given the climate that we're in. And so there's some metrics that go along with they're great places to live. They support lifestyle. There's a great variety there. There's some very solid economic components to it that are very stabilizing within the community. So when you think about a master plan community, and I talked about there's typically a kind of a top 50 list. Most of those are what we call in the smile states. So the lower quarters, California, Arizona, Texas, Florida, and up the Atlantic coastline. There are a few that happen. 4 actually hit that top 50 list in Colorado, and 1 in Utah. But most of the time, there's a lack of master plan communities of any given size within this region, within Colorado. So I'll introduce Doug. Doug, we'll talk a little bit about La Plata, some of the things that they've been doing historically in Colorado Springs, and tell you about what they've experienced and what they've learned through the process.
Good evening. Thanks for entertaining us. One of the things that I really like about Fountain is that the weather is way better here than in Colorado Springs. Right now, there's a Noah's Ark type rain and hailstorm going on in downtown Colorado Springs, and look, it's nice here. Anyway, La Plata Communities was formed in 1995, and we were formed specifically to acquire assets of the Briargate Master Plan. Briargate was originally formed in the north part of Colorado Springs in 1981, and the original developer assembled 10,000 acres. They developed it pretty successfully till the 80s recession, and they got underwater then and got taken over by the federal government actually, and then we were formed to buy the remaining assets, which is about 5,000 acres. And so we're developing Briargate, the farm, Cordera, Pine Creek, and North Fork are residential communities within Briargate, and then there's 2 community or big commercial areas, the Briargate Business Campus and Briargate Crossing. And then our other master plan is the farm, which includes the campus at Foothills Farm, which is a commercial area. We also have a future project down here, and we have a 600-acre master plan, which we're just starting on over in Grand Junction. This shows the relationship of our current activities, property and Fountain, or that will be in Fountain, hopefully down there at the Norris property. And you can see our various logos up there of things we've developed. That's the Grand Junction one. You probably don't care too much about that, but well, maybe you do. You know where that is probably. Yeah. So that's an infill project of 600 acres, which is completely surrounded by development. It's spectacularly beautiful, sort of like the North property. But anyway, so that shows the location of Briargate in the metro area up north. You can see the Air Force Academy and Black Forest in downtown Colorado Springs. On that map, the red area is Briargate. This is the Briargate master plan. This is, as I said, around 5,000 acres of land. The existing Briargate and Fairfax areas were mostly developed by the first developer. There were a few parcels in there which we finished, but this is also true of Summerfield and Gatehouse. But we developed almost all of the Briargate business campus, which you see up there, the Pine Creek commercial or residential neighborhood, Cordera, another residential neighborhood, and Kettle Creek, which now we call North Fork at Briargate. And we'll talk a little bit about all those things. Those things three things brought that Chris talked about, they're unique to master plan communities. The key thing to that is you take those three elements and you execute them properly. What you create is a community, and that's why we call them master plan communities, because they are all tied together. They work together seamlessly. They create a sense of place, a sense of belonging. They have common themes and common visions, and so we want to show you some of the communities we've created and how we've done that tactically. The Briargate Business Campus, which is the main commercial area located at I-25 and Briargate Parkway. It's 435 acres. It has a lot of retail, over 4 million square feet of office space, way more than downtown Colorado Springs, for example. It's the largest employment center in Colorado Springs. These are some of the views of that, just signage and art that was installed. Actually, I'd like to take credit for that sculpture, but the first developer actually put that in. But that's the kind of thing that gets done in master plan communities to create this sense of community. At the pond at the bottom that's in the business campus and some signage that we have. Again, this shows the location of the business campus in the Briargate master plan, the red area on the left. And these are just some of the buildings that are there. You can see the quality of the architecture and materials and everything that are used. We have a couple of office buildings, medical office building on the top, T. Rowe Price's regional headquarters there on the middle right. I'm not sure what that left-hand building is. Hotel down at the bottom, and an office building there on the right. Just some of the types of buildings that we have in the business campus. These are the Briargate shops, the promenade shops at Briargate at I-25 and Briargate Parkway, high-end commercial shopping area. Very popular, very successful retail center. This is known as a lifestyle center. It's like an old mall, except it's outdoors instead of enclosed. This is Briargate Crossing, shown in red. It's on the other end of Briargate Parkway from the business campus. It's a few hundred acres in size too. It's our other main commercial area. And you can see again some of the buildings there. The middle left building is the UC Health Memorial Hospital, which we sold them a big medical campus there that they've been building out. The upper right, that's Lifetime Fitness, a big, large recreation and fitness center. Office building on the upper left, that's another rehab center on the right there, a super Target, and a restaurant. All these things are in Briargate Crossing. Pine Creek was our first residential community. It's about 2,400 homes, single-family detached homes in Pine Creek. When it was developed around a golf course. Again, we didn't build a golf course. The first developer actually built a golf course, but then never developed any of the land around it. We did buy the golf course and developed and got the benefit of that, but we later sold the golf course. But we built around it. There you can see some scenes of showing the golf course and how the housing fits around there. Makes a very attractive neighborhood. And of course, these homes are rather expensive in the El Paso County hierarchy. This is a upper left. That's a public park that we built in Briargate with, you can see the water features there. And then in the lower right, you can see some of the views from that park and the housing that's around the park. So that's Pine Creek. The next one is Cordera. We started on Cordera in 2005 with the first homes right before the Great Recession. It sat more or less idle for several years. We did a few things, but as Chris pointed out, we did much better in bad economic times than others. So we managed to continue to sell houses at a slower pace, and the development did okay given the conditions. And then it really picked up again. And here you see a detailed plan of Cordera. That pink on the left is the Briargate Business Campus, which I showed you before. And then the yellow and green on the right is the residential area. The green are parks. Those parks are actually owned by the HOA, but they're all open to the public. We dedicated the land and built those parks and did improvements in them. I think we'll have some scenes of what's in there. That upper right yellow green space, which doesn't have the lots shown on it, is the last piece of Cordera, which we've got part of that platted now, and in 2 years that'll be completely finished and Cordera will be sold out. This is the Cordera Community Center. One of the things that you can do as a master plan developer that you can't do if you're just doing subdivisions, Chris alluded to that, because we have lots of land, we have economies of scale, we can build amenities and recreational facilities for the residents. This is an example of that. These are all pictures from the community center in Cordera. You can see the building on the right-hand side, and it's next to a big park that we constructed. And this is a pre-COVID gathering of residents. We do a series of summer concerts every year there in that park, and all the residents come out. You can see the pool. We recently built another pool. So we have 2 pools at this site. I don't know if we've been able to open the new one yet or not, but it is finished. I guess it just opened. And then you can see the back porch, which looks over that park. And there's one of the areas of the pool there where the kids are playing. I don't think you see a lot of these kinds of facilities in residential neighborhoods of Fountain because they've all been developed on a small scale, and no landowner developer can really afford to do this if they only have 50 acres. This is part of the trail system of Cordera. This gives you some idea of the kinds of things we do. There's a connected trails. It's easy to get from every single home onto one of these trail systems. You can walk all through the project, or bike or jog, and never go on a street. Do it on a trail system. This you can see in the back, there's a tunnel and an underpass. The road up top is Briargate Parkway, which is a major 4-lane arterial. And we built that underpass so that people on the south side of Cordera could get anywhere in the project without having to cross a major arterial. And the school is on the other side of that street. So all the kids that live on the south, they can walk to the school or ride their bikes to the school and not have to cross the road because they can go under that underpass. And we have 2 of those in the project to serve that purpose. Then North Fork at Briargate, which is our newest community. It has, I should say Cordera has about 1,700 single family detached units. The North Fork at Briargate has about 800. That's just a plan showing the various filings there. This is built right by Pine Creek High School, if you know what that is. And this is well underway. Every single lot that's shown on that map is either occupied by a home where somebody's living or is under contract to sell to a builder. So this project is also almost finished. Will be done here in a year with this. And this is a bit, this was intentionally designed to be lower priced than other parts of Cordera or Pine Creek, and it's worked very well. Demand's been very high. That of course has caused the prices to rise, but it's still, relatively speaking, the lowest price part of Briargate. You can see it also includes an elementary school up there on the right, which they've just started construction on, School District 20, and there's a city park there north of that. And then so that's Briargate with our 3 communities there. This is the farm, which is another of our master plan communities. Again, it's in the north part of Colorado Springs. You can see on the left-hand map where that's located, right across from the Air Force Academy. And then there's the master plan on the right. The northerly portion on the yellow area is single family detached housing. And those lots, there's about 509 single family detached homes in this. The total size of the master plan is about 435 acres. And again, that'll be finished in, all the lots will be sold in about a year and a half. What we've done here, you can see all the open space, all the green space around the ponds that are there on the property. All that's permanent open space. All the other green that you see there is permanent open space. This is a linear park system. You can see there are trails all through that open space, and there are trails on the, so you can again go all around the neighborhood with trails, and then those trails connect to regional systems so people can get around the town with on trails. The purple part on the southerly westerly side and the orange down in the right, those are commercial and multifamily. The lower right hand corner is apartments, which are been fully occupied now, and some higher density single family detached, all of which have been sold. On the big purple piece, most of that we sold to Ent Federal Credit Union. If you drive by on I-25, you see a big white building that's being constructed there. That's Ent's headquarters. That's a 300,000 square foot building. It's going to be fantastic. And so we've got apartments and retail and some other office building on that side. That gray area there is the Great Wolf Lodge. If you've seen that, that's what is there. This is the the sign at the main entry to the farm. You can't quite see it in this photo, but in the background, that frame perfectly frames Pikes Peak. So as you walk in, you look through that, you look up at the sign, you see Pikes Peak in the background. These are some scenes from there. That lower left, that's a pedestrian bridge we built across Black Squirrel Creek. And it connects the commercial side of the development to the residential side. So you can walk or ride your bike over to all the restaurants and shops and everything. They're up on Interquest Parkway. And then that shows you some of the scenery, and there's a street scene of homes in the farm on the lower right. Again, upper left is a mail kiosk. That's where all the mailboxes go for the entire community. We built most of this kiosk out of materials from an old barn that was on the property when it actually was a farm. We couldn't reuse the barn, but we have reused a lot of the materials, and some of them were used in there, the woodworking inside and that metal portion of the roof. On the right, that's a little park along our linear trail. It goes through linear park system that goes through the farm where kids can stop and swing, and that's a scene of one of the trails that exists in the farm on the bottom. This is the community center in the farm, what's called the gathering place. It was designed to be reminiscent of a ranch house and barn. And again, we use some of the materials from the original barn in there. It has a pool that you can see in the background in that right-hand photograph. And that's the front entryway that you see in the upper left. And so that's, it's got a pool, it's got a fitness center, it's got meeting rooms, it's got a kitchen available for use by the residents. That is a private facility for the residents. And it just opened a couple months ago. This is the campus at Foothills Farm. This is the commercial side of the farm master plan that I alluded to before. There's the Ent building, which is under construction. That's kind of what it'll look like when it's done. It'll be very visible as you're driving on I-25. And we recently toured the building. It's supposed to be open in April. And there's 1,800 room for 1,800 employees in there. It's a spectacular building. These are some other office buildings that we're building there. Actually, one of them, we're building 3 of these. They're about 20,000 square feet each. We're going to occupy one of these buildings with our company and one of our builder partners. So that's the some of the things we've done in Colorado Springs. So, and hopefully we can do something like that here too. Anybody have any questions for me? I'd be happy to address them. Thank you.
Fascinating that people are buying houses and moving in, and then they see you went down the streets and they saw that one. And they go down the street, so they must like it really well. It's just beautiful. It's gonna be really nice when it's done. I was impressed with the quality of the stores that are up. Like the stores that the community, the bridal shops.
Right.
Very nice. And then how huge elementary school out there. Now, so my question becomes, when you set this land aside in the school district, builds the school, because the one out this especially, they all kind of match in the community. So how do you make that work?
Yes, we dedicate the land that is gifted to the school district, right? And there's a formula for for how much land depending on what type of school. And we've dedicated in Briargate, I don't know, in all of Briargate, maybe close to 20 school sites. There's several high schools, Pine Creek High School. You saw that on one of the maps. We dedicated that site. Nearby there's a K through 8. I talked about the new elementary school that's been being constructed. So we dedicate the land, in this case, to School District 20. We put in all the improvements around the school so that it's ready to build on, and then they build the schools. Yes. Yes, we work with them on the design. They submit their designs to us. Now with our other commercial users, we actually have the right to dictate the design, and if we don't like it, we don't approve it, and they can't build it. The schools were a lot more flexible. If they gave us a bad design, we don't really have any legal authority over a public entity. But we work really well with them, and we work on the design, and they've done a pretty good job of designing schools so that they're attractive. The Chinook Trails Elementary School, if you've ever seen that school, it has some really unusual architecture. Most people really like it. Some of them don't so much, but it's really a beautiful school, and Pine Creek High School is very attractive, and really all the schools.
I mean, the one out east is so huge, I thought the kids would never have.
Yeah.
I didn't realize.
It's okay, just the people on the,
Okay,
on the remote, I can hear you.
okay, sorry.
Oh, you're good.
Anybody else? Okay.
Hold on real quick. I hope they can still hear me online, Paul, but if there anybody who's online has any questions, unmute your mic and that will give me an indication that you have a question.
And we have some attendees as well, they have to raise their hands. They won't be able to-
Okay, yeah, I don't see the attendees on mine. I just see the panelists. So if you see anybody that has a hand up, let me know.
There was a comment, there were some folks there were folks having problems hearing people in the back of the room, but I've been trying to work my way around with the
Okay.
microphone on that.
I could hear you fine.
Okay, so right now we're just gonna go ahead and we don't have any questions as it stands right now. And if questions come up and you, especially for those who are online, and you want to ask something, either type something in the chat so I can see, and then I can unmute you from there, or if you just want to put it in the chat, we'll go ahead and say it as well. So we're going to go ahead and continue forward, and we'll, again, if you have questions, please let us know.
Okay, I'm going to turn it back over to Chris.
So you said Briargate started in the mid 80s, thereabouts. So we're talking 40 years of effort by a variety of entities to see that vision come to fruition. And so part of the things that we think about, with that, back to what is an MPC, part of the thing we think about is we're thinking 10, 20, 30, 40, depending on the land size, sometimes 50 plus years in the future. And we're trying to predict, we're trying to think about how people may live differently. We're trying to think about what may change in terms of land uses. And so building in flexibility in a master plan is extremely important. I think that shows up in the variety of villages that come online and over time, and what that means and how they change. And that's a very important component. So back to some of the top master plan communities, we've been, DTJ has been privileged to work on several throughout the country, ranging in size, you see, from 5,000 acres That's a big piece of land in Las Vegas. A little bit smaller in Salt Lake City, and then several here in Colorado. Ridgegate, which is on the south side of Denver, is a pretty sizable 1,800 acre land holding. Anthem is in Broomfield, 2,600 acres total land holding. And then Centerra at 3 and the Hollows at 12. So it's all over the board in terms of size. You know, you talked about Redlands out in, is it Redlands? Redlands 360 in Grand Junction, 600 acres. That's still a master plan communities in many parts of the country because it has all of those components that we talked about. So what I want to do is I want to dig in just a little bit more. So the 3 components: strong vision, variety of land uses is the second one, and then the third one is gathering place or community places to gather. So I'm going to talk about those 3 a little bit more specifically and give you some examples about what that looks like across the country. So when we talk about a strong vision, we're talking about a comprehensive plan, really. A little bit different from a comprehensive plan as you would think of it for the city of Fountain, but nonetheless, it's a plan at that scale that allows that flexibility to happen. That vision includes a mix of land uses, and we're thinking about a strong identity. One of the things that you saw when Doug was talking through many of the projects was they, especially as it got to the farm, we're starting to talk about a name and a lifestyle and kind of the feeling that you would have as you live in that community. The architecture starts to reflect that. The community amenities start to reflect that. All of the gatherings and the social side start to tie into that. And that's where we talk about vision and the importance of vision and a strong identity and purpose. The other part of that is strong stakeholder input. Any project that has a lifespan over 10, 20, 30 years is going to need a lot of dialogue with yourselves, with the city, with staff, with the school districts, with different utility providers. Anybody that's participating over that lifespan of that community has input and has knowledge and has things that they can add to the conversation. And that's a really important thing versus just coming in and starting with a small neighborhood, which will only last for a few years. This is a long-term play and a long-term opportunity that really needs to fit within the fabric of a community. And so that stakeholder input is very important. Centerra is in Loveland. Centerra is about a little over 2,000 acres, has a variety of land uses. It started out as a commercial corridor along I-25 and then residential to the east and to the west, or to the right-hand side and the left-hand side of the page. And so what happened is over time, different things developed, but it has a very strong vision that is in place from the very beginning. And you see that in monumentation as you drive along I-25. You see it as part of the retail environment. You see it in the bridges. You see it in the recreation facilities. The landscape is something unique. And so all of those things start to play into the strong vision of the community. And eventually it gets into the residential villages. And as we talk about a mix of housing types, we're really talking about that on a scale that is a neighborhood scale. We're not talking about 200 acres over here of one type of housing and another 100 over here and 300 over there. That's not a mix of housing. That's just different products spread out. That's not a community. A community is where those start to tie together at a neighborhood scale. And it starts to tie into the experience that someone has as they drive into that community. Monumentation is starting to take a different form. It's more than just a sign on the side of the road. This is actually set up as a park environment that actually has the name of the community, Kinston. It actually has an overlook to look at the Front Range. The trail system actually goes up and it connects to the gathering spot, which is part of a community park and part of an amenity campus that overlooks the neighborhoods and out to the Front Range. That experience and that sequence is extremely important to think about in each of the villages that make up the master plan community. And all of that vision gets played out in all of these elements throughout the community. Variety of land uses in neighborhoods. We're talking about, when we talk about a variety of neighborhoods, they may take different shapes and forms. Like Pine Creek was shaped around a golf course that was already in place, and larger homes, a little bit more of a higher price point within the community. And then there may be smaller neighborhoods that take shape. North Fork led to that example. We're trying to create a variety of opportunities for people to buy and be residents here, not just one single type of buyer. A variety of buyers that allows a good stability within that community. So we have a variety of housing types and sizes and pricing. We also have very strong architectural standards. You alluded to that with the schools, with the commercial. There are guidelines for any master plan community that are put in place that control the quality, the look, the character of the housing that comes in, that tries to match that vision that we want to promote. And so those standards apply to residential, those standards apply to commercial and schools and civic buildings, and that really helps to shape a master plan community. There's oftentimes public and urban destinations within any given community. We're thinking about those gathering places not only as a neighborhood recreation facility, but also larger community gatherings. As you think about Fountain and how people gather in Fountain, whether it's out at the parks or whether it's downtown or whether it's at the sports fields, those are all gathering places within Fountain. We're trying to add to that. We're trying to make sure that we complement what's already in a community and provide new places for people to gather, whether it's around shops and restaurants, whether it's around community events. All of those things are important. Looks like we have a misspelling there. But when you're working with architects and landscape architects, there always has to be a misspelling in any of the slides. So just take that for granted. The residential neighborhoods take a variety of shapes and sizes, and we think about not only the streets and lots, we think about the open space components that are in there. Oftentimes within a master plan community, we'll think about the open space first. How do people get around on trails? Then we'll think about where the housing occurs. Then we'll think about how the streets tie into that, how that supports where the schools land. Thinking about those things beyond just how do I get from point A to point B in my car is a very strong driver, a very strong goal that happens within master plan communities. Oftentimes you'll get into density more than just single family lots. We're talking about attached product and housing. We're talking about alley loaded housing. We're talking about housing that's clustered along hillsides and in the natural environment. All of those have room to occur within a master plan community when thought through, and all the supporting elements that are in there. Summerlin is a community that started in the mid-90s in Las Vegas. It's usually one of the top 5 master plan communities in the nation. It's 22,000 acres in size, and it has a long lifespan as well. The 5,000 acres that you see on the left-hand part of the plan is kind of a master plan community within a master plan community. And so what happens is we're always thinking about what's next. We're always thinking about how to tie these things into a bigger story. And so what happens is we start to break these bigger land chunks up into villages. Those villages have names as they relate to what might occur there in terms of how they relate to a natural environment, how they might relate to a type of housing or a type of neighborhood that's there. We start to name those. We start to think about trail networks and a hierarchy of trails. We think about how people bike, how people hike, what open space corridors those need to tie into. On the right-hand side, we start thinking about open space at a variety of levels, hierarchy of those, community open space, large park spaces where big gatherings can occur. We think about trail corridors and open space corridors that tie into the natural environment. Those start to shape the villages, and those start to shape the plans. And from there, we start to put pictures to those words and those graphics that start to demonstrate then how these places might look in the future. It's more than just a plan. It's that vision and that variety that happens throughout the community, whether it's a little retail environment along a main street, whether it happens to be a resort that's tucked into the foothills in the natural environment. Maybe there's custom lot offerings that happen in a pretty special part of the property. And there's mix of neighborhoods that all tie into those open space system and those trail networks and the bigger environment. And so trying to put pictures to those words is an important part of the story that leads into kind of buy-in from the stakeholders, and it allows you to see then what this could look like in the future. And obviously thinking about gateways, signage and monumentation, the street scene, how people experience that as they drive through, walk through, bike through each of these communities. And then the community guidelines. A lot of effort is put into thinking about things like materials and colors and styles, how those relate to a specific neighborhood or community. A lot of thought into landscape. We're in a climate now where water is precious, and thinking about how the landscape and the native plant material and other types of plant material that support that water-wise use can occur, and how that relates to different neighborhoods and different streetscapes and different open spaces. And then lastly, the shared places within any master plan community. Oftentimes those are more passive in open space and trails and parks where people come and gather at their leisure and as they want to within their own neighborhood. Distinctive gateways in, oftentimes that's around a commercial or mixed use environment. And then destinations and amenities. We always say if people drive through the community, they should have already decided that they want to live there. That's what a master plan community is about. That's the story behind that. Then they pick their house. They're not shopping for a house, they're shopping for a community. And many of these places, these destinations and amenities within master plan communities help people look at their self in terms of how they might live there, how they might see themselves and their families and their friends being part of that community. Daybreak in Salt Lake City. One of the things that was thought about early on was the open space network, how we create different destinations, different gathering places. And so you see all the green showing up on the map. That was done prior to shaping the villages, prior to shaping the neighborhoods. We wanted a very strong open space network that allowed people to gather in different ways and create all types of recreational opportunities. Then the neighborhoods took shape. From there, we started to look at, and many master plans communities look at, well, how do we combine these park spaces? How do we combine the open spaces with where people work, with where people gather, with where people may go to a new city hall type of environment? How do we incorporate agriculture? How do we incorporate active uses within those open space elements? And then we start to take clues from that and create the amenity. And this happens to be the hub. It was shaped after an old farmstead that was there. And that becomes not only a gathering place, but it becomes a tool to communicate to future buyers what this place is about. So as you arrive here, this faces out onto a park space. There's a pool behind. You walk into the cafe, buy your coffee and your pastry, you go over to the right and you sit down and you hang out with your computer, see your neighbors as they come in on the weekend To the left, as you would walk in, is actually a sales facility. And so you're actually using this as a tool. Daybreak is using this as a tool to communicate the lifestyle of what happens within Daybreak. And it's a new trend that's happening within these. Couple trends that are showing up, and then we'll wrap. Master plan communities are flexible, they're environmentally sensitive, they're market responsive, and they nurture the lifestyle of the residents. And they do this not only on day one, but they do this throughout the lifespan of the community. We're seeing things like green infrastructure. We're calling it that because it's more than just a trail system. It really is the infrastructure of the community. We're seeing agriculture introduced in a variety of ways, whether that's small garden spaces or larger agricultural components. We talk about things like complete streets and multimodal. The idea of suburban is a term that's been thrown around in the industry for the past few years now. It's an idea that people want to have a little piece of urbanity, small piece of urbanity in their master plan community. We're not talking about cities, we're not talking about towns, we're talking about places that feel a little bit more dense and a little bit different. That's appealing to a millennial buyer and a new type of buyer. Innovation in product, amenities, and technology. Green infrastructure plays through in a variety of ways, mainly in stormwater management. That's a big component. How do we work with the rainfall that comes down and the snowfall that comes down, capture it, control it, and not just stick it in a pipe and send it off on its way? How do we use that as an amenity? So that becomes green infrastructure. Agricultural communities at a variety of scales. There's many that are popping up around the country. Thinking about not only the automobile transportation, but bikes, how to set aside the proper bikeways and trail systems, either within a little bit more urban conditions or within, we're creating things like bike highways. So people can get from one point to another without crossing a major arterial street. The idea of a little bit denser mix of uses within any given neighborhood. Variety of innovative housing types. The builders in the whole Colorado Front Range are doing some great things with innovative product and unique product that is appealing to a wide range of buyers. And then innovative amenities. It's more than just the clubhouse and pool. The amenities are broadening beyond that. We're incorporating little bistros or little coffee shops. We're thinking about how they relate to the street differently. We're thinking about amenities that may just be outdoor with very little condition space, and all those have space then within the master plan community. So there's three real benefits to Fountain, certainly economic, both from a residential standpoint and a tax basis standpoint. It's really integral to your vision of what you want Fountain to be. Fountain is a special place. And so as you think about master plan communities in the future and you think about how those tie in, they need to relate to your vision and what that is, and support that, and not be, maybe they complement it in a unique way, but they're definitely supportive in the vision, and they definitely complete or augment systems that you envision for the future. Trail systems and networks, traffic corridors, different types of utilities. Those citywide systems, parks and open space, those citywide systems are part of your dream for this city, and master plan communities complement that and add to that those things that you're thinking about in the future. So that is a snapshot of what's been happening in master plan communities. I'm sure you have questions about what this looks like, what some of the other things that are happening, or specific questions about some of the projects that we talked about.
Yeah, I have a comment then followed by a question. My brother actually lives in Daybreak, about literally a stone's throw away from the hub. So, and When he moved there, I guess it's been about 3 years ago now. I mean, what a beautiful community it is. Just, it's very amazing. I've had some experiences working in and around and studying master plan communities. And one of the things that I really observe that's always really intrigued me about the whole concept of master planning is that we have this, cities kind of have this traditional zoning that, and we sort of hope that, you know, all the square pegs fit in these square holes that we're creating. But the master planning really seems to allow for just a huge amount of creativity that just doesn't typically happen with the development. And that's been always something that's been intriguing to me. The other piece of that is that we're sort of talking about these master plan communities as sort of these very geographic areas, and then the master planning stops at the edge, which it does. But at the same time, what I've observed is a lot of those benefits start trickling out to the neighboring properties as neighboring properties develop, and as they start connecting into the park systems and the open space systems and the trail systems, and next thing you know, that area that is master planned really has had benefits to the neighboring areas as well. One of the questions, or really the question I have is from I mean, if you were to take, well, I don't know if are you working on the Redlands in Grand Junction, or, well, let's say,
But I might be able to, I'll make an attempt.
let's say a Daybreak type of community or Summerlin, whatever. Well,
Yeah.
Summerlin's huge, right? But I mean, what does a master planning process time frame wise look like from the planning piece? I know the development has been over 40 years, but what does that look like as far as just the time frame to do that? Does
To
that make
actually
sense?
plan it.
Yeah.
Yeah, it kind of, you know, it's probably not as long as you would think. It's really setting up the larger framework of the systems that need to be in place. And so that's, you know, we always say it takes a year to design. Now, depending on how we approach it, we may be able to set up a larger framework, and then it drills down into the specific first phase that happens, the first neighborhood that comes online. That's obviously a lot of time that's put into that very first initial neighborhood that goes into place. But the other thing that I would say is you never stop designing either. The process doesn't stop after 6 months or a year. It's a bit of an iterative process that there's always some guidelines and expectations that occur through those major systems, but they're always being tweaked, modified, improved through time. Yeah.
So I guess my question is, looking at the projects that La Plata's done, I think demographically Fountain is quite a bit different than what you would find your typical buyer in Cordera or Lone Tree or some of those places. Much more transient population. The kind of incomes that people have here are not the sort of incomes that people in Cordera or Flying Horse or places like that make. So in terms of doing a master plan community for Fountain, totally space it. What makes Fountain a good candidate for a development like that? Because typically, the trend, of course, is for higher density all the time. They're building these 4-pack houses and the 6-pack houses around various places, and 1-foot side yard setbacks just to cram as many as you can. Now you come in here and you say, okay, well, we're gonna do a master plan community, and we're gonna have miles of trails, and we're gonna have giant parks, and we're gonna have community centers and all this stuff, which is sort of exactly the opposite of the trend that you see a lot of places. What is it about Fountain that strikes you as being a good candidate for that sort of development?
A couple things. One is Fountain doesn't have one. And so in order to be unique, we can't take what we've done in any of these places or take what La Plata's done up north and just drop it down. That's not going to work in Fountain. It has to be unique to Fountain. And because because you haven't had the opportunity to be involved in one recently, there's a lot of new creativity that can happen, and envision what that can look like. So that would be one thing. The second thing is you've got some significant opportunities for bigger systems to connect. Jimmy Camp Creek is one of those. That corridor is a attribute of Fountain. and finding ways to build on that and make Fountain known for that would be one. You've got the bones down here for a great little downtown. And so finding ways to, that will be a draw in the future as you think about that, and how people who live in the community will benefit from this location.
I want to address your specific question about the developments we've done up north are different than Fountain. That's true, but Briargate itself started as an entry-level community. The initial housing built by the first developer in Briargate were entry-level homes, very inexpensive. Okay, it evolved over time. The neighborhoods which we developed later, were at the upper end of the scale, but the community up there changed. And so we expect that's going to happen to some extent here too. We're not going to build those kind of houses that you see around the golf course down here, at least not initially. We want the people that live here and the people that generally are attracted to be able to afford it. So we're going to have that kind of product. And over time, we expect it to evolve. One of the things we think, some of the reasons we think this will work in Fountain are parallels, again, to what we've done up north. And we don't expect this to be exactly the same because it's a different community and it has different characteristics, and we want to fit in and make it. But this property, or Fountain, I should say, where we're sitting here today, is about the exact same distance from downtown Colorado Springs on I-25 as it is from downtown Colorado Springs to Briargate Parkway on the north. The distance of the Fountain property from I-25 to get to the front door of the property we've acquired is about the exact same distance as it is from I-25 to Cordera. Okay. Fountain it's a nice little town. It's a good community. The property itself has a lot of interest, got a lot of rolling hills, a lot of interesting vegetation, Jimmy Camp Creek, fantastic views that people don't really appreciate until they get out here. It's different than the Pikes Peak views that you get from up north, but it's a really pretty place. I wasn't kidding when I said the weather's better here. It is. The microclimate down here is just better than it is just a little ways north. That's going to attract people. So there are a lot of reasons. And, we're certainly not going to come out and build really big, expensive houses. In the first place, we're going to try to fit the community. Again, we want to have a variety, so there'll be a range of prices and a range of products. And, one way you keep the price down is with density, but you can also do it with design and materials that you require and things like that. So there's a lot of ways that you can do it. And that's part of the risk that developers take. Maybe it doesn't work, but we're pretty confident that it will.
I have a couple other questions from online. They're kind of around the same type of subject. So first one, and this could be for Todd as well, would there be assistance with infrastructure things such as roads with additional traffic? And then that's from Ms. Hundeman. And then Mr. Clements asks, how does fire and emergency protection work in plans like this? So more general. Go ahead, Todd.
Sure. Great questions, and we love the questions, so keep them coming. And in terms of the first question, Ms. Hundeman, the infrastructure portion of that's actually out of kind of DTJ's purview in reference to their specifics they talked about. But that's kind of one of our main priorities, is to make sure that transportation corridors are in place and they're good to go. So one thing, we've got several large property owners out on the eastern boundaries of the city city. And unlike, again, what we've done in the past in Fountain, we're working with those individuals, to include the gentleman here today, to finally update our master transportation plan. So that is ongoing. That was actually initiated several months ago as a partnership. As many residents through the years have made it clear, development should pay their way, and we agree with that, and that's their philosophy as well. So we are overseeing that as the city. Wilson Design is working on that. So we are working on a master transportation plan, not only for the eastern properties, but to improve what we've got in the remainder of the city. Because again, as Fountain sits currently, a bunch of small projects put together, it's very, very difficult to plan for 20, 30, 40 years and master transportation plans if you don't have large landowners that are involved in that process. So we are actually in that transportation process as we speak. And our focus is to, as Colorado Springs grows east, we'd like to see as much as possible with these eastern properties, designing those transportation corridors so that folks are headed out of Fountain to the north, and not funneling them through Old Fountain per se over to the interstate. So that's kind of some of the scope that we've given the engineering company, Wilson and Companies, to look at. But every section of the infrastructure is being looked at to include future fees that would be involved, as developers will pay for the initial infrastructure as they're building a neighborhood. But we want to have something in place that we're able to maintain those in the future, and those being funded and assisted by the people that are moving into those communities. So that's going to be a part of what you'll see come in front of council when we get this master transportation plan updated. So I hope that answered your question on the transportation side of things. Mr. Clement's question in regarding the public safety, we're looking at it the same way. So when you see these type of projects and master plan, they will dedicate certain land in their phases that are dedicated to public safety locations. We've already done some things in years past, so we have some income streams coming in from new businesses that come into the city. I think we started that, Scott, in 2012. So we've put that in place. We will also look at ways that as these neighborhoods grow out, they will help fund additional public safety locations. And that's why we try to ensure that all of these communities have commercial areas within them. And I think these gentlemen showed examples of that. It's just easier to do in a master plan community because it's planned out for so many years. So that we have funding revenue to come in to fund staffing those public safety locations as well. So those are in the plans. Those are always at our first priorities to make sure we're safe and we can move around. And it's nice to be able to deal with entities that look at the city as a partner, which is difficult when you're dealing with a 50-acre national builder project. They're not as vetted in a community because they may be in that project for 3 years and then be out of that project. Hope those answered those, Mayor.
Yeah, that's good. Any questions in here as I look to see anybody else online has any questions?
Yes, Mr. Mayor. I have a question.
Okay, hold on real quick. So we have a question in here. You need a mic. Okay, go ahead, Mr. Rick.
Yes, sir. The question I have, in the presentation, the developer said they have a variety of different sizes of homes and prices of homes. In Fountain, what I've seen is, and the feedback I've gotten is, I can find a small affordable home in Fountain, I can find a mid-range home, but I can't find a large home or a home with a large lot. What sort of percentage are you looking at, or do you generally look at with a development for larger, more luxury type homes? Thank you.
Well, we don't have any fixed ideas about percentages. You know, it's geared to the market at the time, and it changes over time. As I indicated, Briargate started as entry-level housing and evolved into, some of the most expensive housing in the county. We certainly have the land to do big lot areas with expensive houses, and we certainly intend to have that segment in the project in various places. So there'll definitely be some of that. I can't give you a percentage, but it's going to be based on the demand in the marketplace. But there will be some of that product for sure.
Okay, thank you, sir.
Your businesses, your commercial properties that you develop there, do you develop a BID that's going to have its own separate tax?
We do not have a BID anywhere in any of our projects. In Briargate proper, there was something called a general improvement district, which was used on a modest scale to build some of the major streets. For example, we used general improvement district funding to build a portion of Powers Boulevard through our property and to build some of Briargate Parkway. That's basically what it was used for. And there was a separate mill levy for that. That covers residential and commercial property, and it's a mill levy on the property tax. And those bonds are about paid off now, so that'll go away. In the farm master plan, we did a metro district, actually two metropolitan districts. So there's a mill levy, a separate mill levy for debt service on the money borrowed to finance the infrastructure, and then to maintain it. And so we use that financing mechanism to build all the streets and the wet utilities and the parks and other things. And certainly we didn't pay the entire cost through there, but we used that money to pay part of the cost of the public improvements, which we constructed, and then they'll be paid for through the mill levy over time. But there is no business improvement district in any of our projects.
And then I assume these are HOAs?
Yes.
And what is your time frame? And Todd, stop me if this is an inappropriate question.
Specific, we're right on the edge, but go ahead.
Okay. A lot of people get frustrated when HOAs end up being a builder for 10, 15, 20 years and the citizens aren't getting on the board. How do you that so that the citizens feel like they're having, input in the community that's being built?
There are statutory requirements for board representation by the residents of the area. So after a specific time, you have to bring on homeowner representatives onto the board, and we adhere to that. And we like to have homeowner input fairly early. In fact, those rules allow the developers to control the boards for most of the life of the project, and that's typically what we've done. But the Pine Creek Association, for example, we turned that to the homeowners back in about 2005 or so. So they've run it for many, many years. Cordera, we have several homeowners on the board. We still control it, but we work closely with the homeowner groups, and never had any issues. It's the same in the farm. So they eventually get turned over, but fact is, we do control them for a period of time.
Your investment.
Okay. I'm going to look again online to see if there's any other questions. And with that, if anybody in here has questions, just make sure you get the mic. And I'm not seeing anything come through. All right, so let me go ahead and kind of appreciate you guys at least starting the conversation today. I know this is I wouldn't say it's overwhelming, but I don't know what other word to use, but to see, and knowing what we can see with like Briargate and those types of things. But when Todd and I when Todd first brought this idea to me and La Plata was talking and, he goes, well, Briargate. I'm like, oh, that's huge. And not really understanding how long it really took for that build out and the amount of years that went into that. And seeing it, from the interstate and visiting every once in a while, it's really weird to think of that time frame. And I don't know if that's the same kind of time frame you're looking here, but I, just excited to see what comes about. And I think the things that we're really looking forward to, I think, are is kind of what Todd said earlier about we have a developer come in, they throw their cookie cutters down, and then they're out. They don't leave us parks. We have a requirement for open space, and theirs is okay. We'll put our detention pond in there, and that kind of is that. And so what I like about these that it really allows for that thoughtfulness in planning those spaces, because those are important, and they're becoming more and more important. And in the days of COVID, when you can't really go do the shopping, what are families now doing? They're spending more time in those parks and things, so allowing for that as well. So I'm looking forward to see what's in the future and what the possibilities are. And I think really looking at what the community is about and the heritage, and you'll hear different things about what people think of Fountain as a history. I have different ideas of what other people do, but it all makes sense. And so looking forward to all that. So do you guys have anything else, or go ahead, Mr. Applegate? On top.
Oh, yeah. You were talking about the time length, like 40 years and all that. Now, that really wouldn't be like a set time. It would depend a lot on the excitement of what's going on and how everything sold and how everything moved. And
Right.
so when the people in the Springs found out what they could get here, it could be even quicker, maybe 20, 25 years to be complete.
Well, if you talk about all the property that we control, it's going to be 20 years under any circumstance, and probably more than 30 years,
Okay.
even if the markets are really, really good, because we're talking about a lot of land mass.
I know.
And so it'll take, it's a long-term project, and like we do have a real commitment to the community, right? Everybody in our company lives here. I've been working on projects in the Colorado Springs area since 1978. And, our company, has been working on Briargate and the farm since 1995. So we're committed, and we're here for the long term. We're not leaving next week, no matter what happens. Our future's tied here, and we want to make a real positive contribution to the community and fit into the community and improve the community and provide some benefits to us. Of course, we'll get a lot of benefit too if the project works. So I hope it'll be a really long and prosperous relationship.
We do too.
I want to say one other thing that addresses your question about how do you know it's going to work down here. Well, I think it's a pretty safe bet that the region's going to grow, right? The region is in real good shape economically. There's lots of good things happening here. And so businesses and people are going to stay here and build more businesses or move here. So the area is going to grow, and there's only two places it can go, right? The north part of the county is pretty much built out. The north part of the city it's us and Wolf Ranch and Flying Horse. They're all going to be done in a couple of years. You have Banning Lewis Ranch to the east, which is huge, right? And it's going to be around a long time. And those developers are very capable, and they'll do a great job. And then there's south down in this area, right? The growth is going to occur. It can only go to Banning Lewis or down in this area. And we think we have some advantages because, you know, the location, the topography, the views, the proximity to I-25, all advantages for the Fountain area over Banning Lewis. But the growth's going to occur, and so if it's going to occur, it's much better if it's done in a planned, comprehensive way. You know, it would still happen if we weren't here. It would happen with a whole bunch of series of subdivisions. But, you know, I think you'll all eventually agree that having a master plan community with people that are invested in the area is a much better way to grow than a bunch of connected subdivisions.
Yep. Okay, Todd, go ahead.
First thing, I'd like to thank the gentleman for coming down. We appreciate when people are willing to come down and participate in these education workshops. I think it really helps everybody. We've had that request come through several times. I'd like to offer to anyone here, they know of course, but anyone online as well, if anyone has any questions or if they would like to send us any ideas of things they would like to see in any master plan communities, send those to us. Christy's online, Brandy's online, all our staff is online right now. We kept them out of the room so we could fit other folks in here, but send us those ideas and we will make sure we get those to the larger landowners out east in the master plan communities and get them those ideas and those comments. Because a lot of times when you just first go through one of these workshops, you don't think about it. If you have any other questions, feel free to call Christy, myself. And one of the misconceptions I want to make sure that we get out there in any public format where we have an opportunity is a lot of folks don't understand in our city that there is communities that are building around us in the county, like Lorson Ranch, the Glens that you see out off of Mark Shuffle. They think that is in the city of Fountain and that we have, quote, control over what they do there. And the misconception is they're in the county and we don't have that control. So if we don't get involved with the larger landowners out east and in these type of projects, we won't have a say so. They will still develop around us, but it will be county, and that infrastructure that Sarah asked a great question on and Mr. Clements did will be out of our control. And I've talked about it before because of my experience working in the county. The county has those communities that spring up right on our borders, and it negatively impacts our public safety. It negatively impacts our infrastructure. And we don't have the ability as we do on some of these. And if you've kept up with the update of the master plan that the county is doing, their summarization was exactly what Mr. Quimby just said. It said the growth areas are going to be out in Banning Lewis and down here on the eastern edge of Fountain. So if we don't get involved, we never will have a say so in how that looks. And we are getting examples of that of Lorson Ranch and the Glens, because we are negatively getting impacted by drainage coming off of Lorson Ranch. Their traffic still uses our roads, but we have no say so. Our public safety still has to go out and cover the one deputy that's responsible for Widefield on weekends and during high calls for service time frame. Our fire department still has to go out and do mutual aid. So I just want to make sure that everybody understands those misconceptions. If it's not in the city, then we won't have a say so, but it still is going to grow around us. So please send us your ideas, call us with anything you've got, any questions. We're happy to spend any amount of time with who we can. But I appreciate, I think, Mayor, we've almost got, I think, the entire planning commission and council that have been on in one way, shape or form tonight. So we really appreciate everybody taking that time and battling the weather and doing everything else. We, as a staff, we really appreciate that.
One other thing, Todd, to follow up on that, if any members of council or planning commission or staff would like to see any of our projects, to see the actual areas and how they look and how they work, we'd be happy to give tours, individual tours, or with the group or whatever, and we do that at your convenience if anybody's interested in seeing those.
Okay, thank you. All right, with that, again, once again, thank you for coming out. Thank you for those who are online and taking part. Again, if you have any questions or comments or concerns, please forward them to the staff here and we'll get them to the right direction as we need to. So with that, thank you, everybody. Enjoy the rest of your evening.
Live and in virtual.